Let us continue our discussion on chapter 3, class 12th NCERT biology for NEET entrance exam. This is human reproduction. And as I told you in the previous video that this would be the final topic, the final two sections that we will discuss in this video. One would be 3.6 pregnancy and embryonic development, and the other would be 3.7 parturition and lactation. So very elementary knowledge of the basic concepts is required for a class 12th student who is appearing in the NEET entrance exam. So these are very complex processes. Once you go into the medical college in your first year MBBS as a part of the curriculum of the subject anatomy, you will be reading the human embryonic development, and believe me, it is not simple. So we have to just get the basics that are given in NCERT right. Time and again I am telling you about the importance of understanding the NCERT, because we know that the entrance will primarily be based on the NCERT textbook. So what I have done for this section is that I would take a different approach. Directly we are going to the NCERT. This is 3.6, and we will see what NCERT says, and then I will try to explain what does it mean. And obviously I may actually elaborate the concepts just to understand what NCERT is saying. So here in NCERT we know about implantation. Implantation occurs at the level of the blastocyst. This happens at 7th 8th day post fertilization, and 7th 8th day post fertilization in an ideal menstrual cycle of 28 days would be day 22, day 23 of the menstrual cycle, where corpus luteum is working very fine and the progesterone level is very high, and therefore endometrium is very nutritive and ready to accept the implantation. I hope this thing is absolutely clear. Just to revise what we have read in the previous video. So finger-like projections appear on the trophoblast called chorionic villi, which are surrounded by the uterine tissue and maternal blood. The chorionic villi and uterine tissue become interdigited and they form the placenta. So let me explain this to you. So if you remember, I made a diagram in the previous video where I said that let us think that something like what is the sequence that leads to the implantation of the blastocyst. So let us just have a quick revision. This is the uterine endometrium, and because now the zona pellucida is gone, so we say that after the hatching of the blastocyst, the trophoblast cells, they come in contact with the maternal tissue, the uterine endometrium. I hope you remember this. So this is the blastocyst, we are saying, because the zona pellucida is gone, and therefore these trophoblast cells, they come in contact with the uterine endometrium, and then obviously there will be an inner cell mass as well, and these trophoblast cells will enter and will actually go into the substance of the uterine endometrium, fixing the blastocyst on the wall of the endometrium. That process is called as implantation. And what happens is that these cells, they invade into the uterine endometrium, and some of them become syncytial and form the chorion. So they fuse with each other, they become syncytial. You know, a multinucleate condition is called as syncytium, and this is an extra embryonic membrane. This extra embryonic membrane is called as the chorion. You can see that trophoblast cells form chorion, and this chorion along with allantois leads to the formation of the human placenta, and therefore the human placenta is called as chorioallantoic. So these are the two extra embryonic membrane that take part in the formation of the human placenta. So let us write it chorioallantoic. And then we said that because corpus luteum is not degenerated, it continues to secrete progesterone, and therefore this endometrium, which is now actually called as the decidua, will keep on progressing, will keep on getting better and better, more healthy, and will actually surround the entire developing fetus. And this is how implantation occurs. This is blastocyst again, 7th 8th day post fertilization, and you can see the role of, let me write it here, the trophoblast cells that lead to the formation of placenta, because their derivatives are chorion and allantois. I hope this thing is absolutely absolutely clear. Now what NCERT is saying, can you see the finger-like projections here? They would be called as the chorionic villi. I can understand this, that now this thing should be called as villi. There should be no problem in understanding the word chorionic villi, because we are talking about finger-like projection. And what happens is that the decidua, the tissue on the maternal side, will first actually interact with it, will get interdigitated. So this is what is called as an interdigitation. And then in the human beings, the maternal side tissues are lost, and which means that these chorionic villi are actually bathing directly into the maternal blood, and therefore the human placenta may also be called as hemochorial. So this is how the placenta is formed. Placenta becomes fully functional at 10 to 12 weeks of pregnancy. So this is the time when the placenta becomes fully functional, and till this time it is important that the corpus luteum may be maintained, and that corpus luteum was maintained by HCG. Again, HCG has been produced by the trophoblast cell. I hope you remember the previous video. So till the placenta becomes fully functional, it is important that corpus luteum must be maintained, because once the placenta is fully developed, it is also able to act as a temporary endocrine gland and actually can produce progesterone and estrogen along with HCG itself. So I hope this point is absolutely clear. Now again, going back to your NCERT, this is what the NCERT is saying, and we now know that what would be the chorionic villi. What is the meaning of chorionic villi? And when we say that what happens in the formation of the placenta, I have elaborated that actually along with chorion there is allantois as well. The maternal tissues are later on lost, and the chorionic villi are actually bathing into the maternal blood, which means that the efficiency of the transport is increased between the maternal and the fetal tissues, and this type of placenta is called as hemochorial. Now moving further to the next paragraph. Now then it tells you about the functions of the placenta. So this placenta, everybody knows, it facilitates the supply of oxygen and nutrients to the embryo and removal of carbon dioxide and excretory waste material produced by the embryo, which means that this is how the exchange between the body of the mother and the fetus take place. The nutrients and oxygen come into the fetal side, and from the fetal side the excretory products that have been produced are transported towards the maternal side, and the mother then eliminates it. So this is the basic function of the placenta. And then your NCERT says that it contains what is called as an umbilical cord. So let us look at what exactly is an umbilical cord. So just to redraw this diagram, let us say that this is a developing embryo. This embryo has been implanted on the uterine wall. I will have to make this diagram again and again, and we are saying that these are some trophoblast cells. The later one becomes syncytial, thrown into finger-like projection. You know that everything surrounding it would be the decidua, and then there is the formation of the placenta, and this placenta actually has what is called as the umbilical cord. So in the placenta would be present what is called as the umbilical cord. Now just to understand the constituents of the umbilical cord, please remember this. So in the fetal side, so this time I am talking about the fetal circulation. I am talking about the circulation of the fetus, and this is the aorta, and there is an arch of aorta, then there is descending aorta. The aorta divides into iliac arteries, and iliac arteries are actually both internal as well as external iliac arteries. So let me just take a bit of time just to make this figure. What we are saying is that this is an external iliac artery and an internal iliac artery, just a very crude diagrammatic representation. So let us say that this is an internal iliac artery. So there are two of them, and you can easily imagine that this is the aorta that is making an arch, and then it is descending, and just near the navel you can see that there may be a bifurcation. And what happens is that one branch of the internal iliac artery, right one, and one branch of the left internal iliac artery, they come out through that umbilical opening and enter into the placenta. So this umbilical cord carries two umbilical arteries. It carries two umbilical arteries, and these umbilical arteries are the derivatives of the internal iliac artery from the fetal side. So just to make the diagram, you can just imagine that this would be an artery of this internal iliac artery, this would be a branch of this internal iliac artery. They go into the placenta, and then there is a capillary network, and then what happens is that the things are exchanged with the mother. The blood gets actually purified, and it is returned by a single umbilical vein. So it is returned to the fetus by a single umbilical vein. So which means that umbilical cord has two umbilical arteries and one umbilical vein, and this umbilical vein again enters through the umbilical opening into the fetal body, divides into two branches. One goes to the hepatic portal vein, but the majority of the blood carrying vessel actually opens into the inferior vena cava. This is how the circulation is established between the fetus and the mother. So this is what is meant by umbilical cord. And you know that after parturition, this is where the gynecologist actually puts clamp and cut the connection between the mother and the fetal body by a sterile blade, which will prevent tetanus neonatorum. So I hope now you got the idea that what exactly is an umbilical artery. Now, what exactly is umbilical cord? I hope this thing is now absolutely clear. The second thing it is saying is that placenta also act as an endocrine tissue. Just now I told you that the placenta becomes fully functional at 10 to 12 weeks, and obviously it is involved in the exchange function but acts as a temporary endocrine gland again, and it is able to produce some hormones, and the name of the placental hormones would be HCG. There would be an HPL, this is human placental lactogen, and obviously this would be a metabolic hormone, and gonadotropin is similar to LH, and finally there it can actually secrete estrogen as well as progesterone. And you know that we are very much interested in this hormone progesterone. We are calling this hormone as the pregnancy hormone, and that will keep the uterine endometrium healthy and the pregnancy going. So this is very, very important function of the human placenta, that it is acting as an endocrine gland and secreting some hormones. Now this progesterone will be secreted at a very high level. At a very high level, the progesterone will be secreted during pregnancy. The secretion of estrogen would be low. So the secretion of the estrogen would be low, and high level of progesterone actually inhibits the contraction of the myometrium and therefore prevents abortion. Now understand it very clearly. We are saying that a high level of progesterone during pregnancy will inhibit the myometrium contractility and therefore will prevent abortion. Moreover, a high level of progesterone will inhibit FSH and LH and further development of other follicles. So another pregnancy will not be established during an ongoing pregnancy. Some very, very important functions that are the functions of placenta. And then it says, your NCERT says that the secretion of some hormones is increased during pregnancy. So pregnancy is a sort of stress on the maternal body, and a lot of energy is required. You know that the nutrient requirement in the pregnancy and lactation period is normally higher, and that is very important because mother is taking care of the need of the fetus as well, and there would be some metabolic demands of pregnancy as well. So we anticipate that the hormones like thyroxine, which have a metabolic role to play, they will be increased in the fetal life in the maternal body. So during pregnancy, I should not say fetal life, I should say during pregnancy in the maternal body, the secretion of these hormones may increase many folds, and these hormones, they will be important in the metabolism. So what your NCERT is saying is that The placenta itself produces human chorionic gonadotropin. We know what is the function of human chorionic gonadotropin, HPL, estrogens and progesterones. And in the last phase of the pregnancy, there is a relaxin. I will be just now telling you what exactly it is. And then we are saying that the level of estrogen, progesterone, cortisol. You know cortisol is a metabolic hormone. You know about thyroxine. It is also a metabolic hormone, and obviously prolactin will have a very important role to play in the lactation part later on, and its effects on the mammary gland would be important at this particular time. And these are the hormones that are increased several fold. Now please understand HCG. So this is very important. HCG and HPL are produced only during pregnancy. They are secreted only during pregnancy. But estrogen, progesterone are secreted in the non-pregnant female as well. Cortisol, prolactin, thyroxine, etc. all are produced in non-pregnant female as well. Their level of secretion increases manifold. There is a question here. I hope you understand. Now coming back to relaxin. The relaxin would be produced by the ovary. So relaxin is a hormone that can be produced by ovary. This is what NCERT says, and let me tell you that it can also be produced by placenta. But for you, this is very important because this is the information that is given in the NCERT. This is an additional information that I am giving. Again, this relaxin is again having metabolic effects. It also affects the cardiovascular system, especially. It leads to the production of nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. But at your level, what you must understand is that this also leads to a sort of relaxation of the pubic ligaments. And therefore the pathway, the birth passage becomes more accommodating, and it will facilitate the process of parturition. That would be an important function of relaxin. But please remember, relaxin does have metabolic effects, and especially it affects the cardiovascular system as well. I hope this endocrine function of placenta is now absolutely clear. Now moving on. So this is what we have done. Then let us move on. Just give me a minute. Then we say that immediately after implantation, there is an inner cell mass. What happens to the inner cell mass? Now, again, we will have to make a diagram, and let me make it again. Just bear with me. What exactly is happening? So I am just making, for the sake of understanding, a rough diagram, and therefore I am not going into the details, just telling you that this is an embryo. We know that the trophoblast cells will be involved in the implantation, and now we also know that there would be an inner cell mass. So this would be the inner cell mass. I have already told you in previous video that the trophoblast cells will not contribute anything to the future embryo. They will be involved in the formation of placenta, but not the embryonic tissues. And the proper embryo is actually formed by the inner cell mass. And these inner cell mass, they will get organized into 3 germ layers. So just at this level, please try to understand that this inner cell mass will form the complete embryo. And then we say that ultimately it will differentiate into 3 germ layers. And these 3 germ layers would be an ectoderm, and a mesoderm, and also what is called as an endoderm. So this is the formation of 3 germ layers. We are saying this is ectoderm, this is mesoderm, this is endoderm. Again asking you, please stick to the basics. If you are interested in the details that how it happens, I have discussed this topic in detail in the main video course. You can go and watch it. We have seen how it gets organized into a bilaminar embryo, and then how it actually gets itself organized into a trilaminar embryo. But for just before our NEET entrance exam, what we must remember is that the inner cell mass cells actually differentiate into the 3 germ layers. This process is called as gastrulation. So sometimes the doctors say that this is probably the most important thing that has happened to you in your life, because that what is going to happen is that after the formation of the three germ layers there would be organogenesis. Now organogenesis would be the formation of the organs, and the organs will be derived from one of the germ layers. So for example, the neural system is derived from the ectoderm. The bulk of the human body, including the muscles and the bone, is derived from the embryonic mesoderm. So that means there is formation of the three germ layers. That is why we are triploblastic, if you remember, and therefore any animal which is diploblastic is unlikely to have muscle, because muscle itself is derivative of mesoderm and therefore will have a problem with locomotion. Just try to understand the evolutionary advantage of mesoderm. So I hope this thing is absolutely clear. So first what happens is that there is fertilization, then fertilization, it leads to the cleavage, formation of zygote, then cleavage, then you remember morula undergoes compaction, and then the blastocyst, the hatching of blastocyst, implantation on the wall of the uterine endometrium, formation of the placenta by the trophoblastic cell, and the inner cell mass getting organized by the gastrulation into three embryonic germ layers, and then each germ layer will be giving rise to certain set of organs which is not in our syllabus, not in the syllabus of NEET as well. So you don't have to look at the anatomy of the organogenesis. Believe me that once required, when you will be in MBBS, it will be one of the toughest things to understand then. Now, so leave it for first year MBBS. Now just try to understand that what happens is that this is the inner cell layer called as the endoderm. So that means immediately after implantation, the inner cell mass differentiates into an outer layer called ectoderm and an inner layer called endoderm, and then mesoderm appears between the ectoderm and endoderm. As I told you that diploblastic organisms will not be having mesoderm. So first an ectoderm is formed, then an endoderm is formed, and some cells enter in between the two, and they are forming what is called as the embryonic mesoderm, and then all organs arise from these three germ layers. So I hope this is absolutely clear. Now it is very easy to understand that they will be having some stem cells that are capable of, they may be pluripotent stem cells. You know what is pluripotency. I hope this paragraph is now absolutely clear. So moving further, so just give me a minute. Moving further, then what are the major features of embryonic development at various months? At various months, so just let me see it. Yes, at various months, what are the various developmental milestones during pregnancy? Please, it is my request that there is some data that has been provided in your NCERT, some factual information that what happens at the end of what month. Limit yourself to the information that is given only in the NCERT. Just remember, the first organ to be formed would be the heart, and that can be so by the end of 1 month the embryonic heart is formed, and therefore the gynecologists are able to listen to the heart sounds of the fetus to understand the well-being of the fetus with the help of a stethoscope. So this is what I am saying, that please limit yourself to this thing. We are saying that after 1 month the embryo's heart is formed, and then by the second month of pregnancy fetus develop limbs and digits. By the end of 12 weeks, this would be end of 3 months or the first trimester, what is formed, then the first movement during the 5th month, and then what happens during the 6th month. I hope this thing is now absolutely clear. We have to limit ourselves only to these developmental milestones that are given in NCERT. And then your NCERT says that by the end of the 9th month of pregnancy, the fetus is fully developed and is ready for delivery. And it talks about a fetal ejection reflex. Now let us understand this. What happens during parturition? What happens is that a fully developed fetus and placenta, they initiate what is called as a fetal ejection reflex. So this is a neuroendocrine mechanism that leads to the birth of the child or the parturition. So this is called as fetal ejection reflex. It is initiated by a fully developed fetus and placenta. This question has been asked many times, so please try to remember this. So if you remember, I told you that during pregnancy, the placenta actually secretes larger amount of progesterone as compared to the estrogen. And that progesterone actually inhibits the myometrium contractility. So when the fetus is fully developed, a signal is sent to the placenta, and the placenta decreases the secretion of progesterone and increases the secretion of estrogen. I think this should be now absolutely clear. So when the signal of the fully developed fetus reaches placenta, what happens is that placenta decreases the secretion of progesterone and increases the secretion of estrogen. This progesterone was keeping the myometrium contractility inhibited. But because now the progesterone is decreased and estrogen is increased, it will lead to the contraction of the myometrium. So we know that myometrium is the smooth muscle that is the middle wall of the uterine endometrium, and this layer takes part in the childbirth or parturition. And obviously the contraction of the myometrium will cause pain, and this pain will be perceived by the maternal hypothalamus, and then through the maternal pituitary oxytocin will be released. I hope this thing is now absolutely clear. And this oxytocin acts on the smooth muscle of the gravid uterus and induces further stronger contraction. These pains are actually called as labor pain. They keep on increasing in intensity and frequency. More oxytocin will mean stronger contraction, would mean more pain, and which will lead to a positive feedback. More oxytocin, and therefore the myometrium contraction will become stronger and stronger, and then it will lead to the process of the childbirth or parturition. I hope this thing is absolutely clear. So what happens again is, just to revise this concept, I am saying that when the fetus is fully developed, the placenta decreases the secretion of progesterone, increases the secretion of estrogen. This leads to myometrium contraction, the onset of the labor pains. This pain is perceived by the maternal hypothalamus, and you know that through posterior pituitary oxytocin will be released. This oxytocin again induces a stronger contraction in the myometrium, and then there is a positive feedback which leads to the parturition or the birth of the baby. I hope this thing is now absolutely clear. So now after the gestation period, there is a complex neuroendocrine mechanism, and we know about the role of the oxytocin. We know what exactly is a fetal ejection reflex, and oxytocin acts on the uterine muscle, causes stronger uterine contraction. We know that these are the labor pains, and there is a positive feedback that leads to the expulsion of the baby outside the uterus through the birth canal, and this process is called as parturition. And then the delivery of the baby is followed by the delivery of the placenta, and this is the time the fetal and the maternal blood may get mixed. And if there were an issue of Rh incompatibility, this is the time that you give anti-Rh immunoglobulin, if you remember your class 11th NCERT. So this is the time to take care of any issues of Rh incompatibility between the fetus and the mother. I hope this is absolutely clear. Obviously, you know about human placental lactogen, you know about prolactin, you know estrogen and progesterone are being produced during pregnancy, and I have already told in the previous video what is the function of these hormones on the mammary gland. So after the birth of the baby, lactation will be important, and for lactation to occur, there must be the development of the mammary gland. It should get ready for this function, and we know that because the acquired immunity of the fetus is not well developed, it is not well developed. So therefore the passive immunity, that the naturally acquired passive immunity that the fetus or the newborn gets through placenta or through lactation is of paramount importance. So please remember, naturally acquired passive immunity, the fetus may get it through placenta. We know that IgG class of antibodies can cross placenta, and after the birth it can be, these antibodies can be present in the milk of the mother, especially the milk that is produced in the earlier days, just a few days after the pregnancy, in the earlier few days, the thick yellowish type of fluid that is produced, which is called as colostrums. It is high in content in protein, and it contains antibodies, and especially the antibodies of IgA class, and these are very, very important for the newborn, and that is why it is very important to keep the child with the mother as much as possible. So in baby friendly hospitals, it is an endeavor of the doctors and the staff to keep the child as much close to the mother, because it gives the opportunity of breastfeeding as well as leads to the development of a very strong bond between the neonate and the mother. So this is how this thing happens. I hope now you have understood the chapter, the human reproduction chapter. Mind you, there can be 4, maybe 5 questions. Majority of the questions are very straightforward. Try to limit yourself to the NCERT, and therefore we have discussed in this revision course just before your NEET entrance exam the entire NCERT. We have elaborated NCERT as well, so all the questions have been taken care of. And if you want more practice, and if you are reading masterclass, following masterclass in biology, you can revise the question from the understanding NCERT portion as well as the previous year papers portion. This is what needs to be done before the entrance examination. Have confidence in your capability, and you are ready and good to go for your entrance examination. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.